and good evening. My name is Tatiana Quiroga. My pronouns are she, ella. I'm on the board of directors for Come Out with Pride Orlando. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at a seat at the table. This is a community conversation that we launched a couple months ago talking about all different aspects of the LGBTQ plus community. So tonight we're going to be discussing allies. We know them, we love them. Let's give them a little credit and let's hear about them. So first up, joining us tonight is Carrie Griffin. She's with the Orlando VA. She's the LGBTQ liaison. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi.
Then we've got Josh Bell. He's the newly appointed executive director for Orlando One Alliance. Welcome, Josh. Oop, you're muted.
I am no longer muted.
There you go.
Good to see you.
And lastly but not least, we've got Ashley Figueroa. She's the co-founder of Gender Advancement Project.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your time and for being here. We know that allies have been part of the LGBTQ plus movement since dawn. Oh, hi, Anna. How are you?
Hello, everyone. Sorry for my delay. I was just with OYA and just hopped off that Zoom. And so I'm really happy to be here. Great to see both Ashley and Josh as well.
Absolutely.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So we were starting off the conversation, but just saying that, that allies have been part of the LGBTQ plus movement since, the very beginning. We know that they have walked alongside us. So I just wanted to kind of give a broad definition of what exactly allyship is. So, Carrie, if you want to, give us your definition of what is an ally.
Well, for me, I am married to, I'm a cisgender woman. I'm married to a man. I have 2 sons. And so for me, it's always meant being there for all the persons that I've known, love, my friends, my family, and from all walks of life, all races, all religions, sexual orientation, gender identity. It's just walking beside them, holding space for them, and being there and willing to stand up and next to if you need to. I have tried to pride myself on being that for others. Being a licensed clinical social worker, it's kind of been in my blood to advocate and help others. So to me, that's part of being an ally, is no matter what, being there for those that we love and care about, our fellow human beings. I think that that's what it's all about for me.
Awesome. Thank you. And Anna, would you like to jump in?
I would love to. What's interesting is that, and again, I know I hopped in late, but I'm the State House representative for District 47 in the Florida legislature, and we are home to Pulse nightclub. We are home to where we lost 49 Angels at Pulse nightclub. We also have Zebra Coalition, the LGBTQ Center off Mills. We have Southern Nights. This really is a community that cares about inclusivity and creates sanctuaries for people to be themselves. And as a cis hetero person of color, woman of color, I think it's incredibly important that we go beyond allyship, and which is why I call myself an accomplice. And so to kind of echo what Carrie was saying, I think for me that means like we gotta show up for issues even when they're incredibly challenging, even controversial. Like we need to stand up and step up and say, even though I am not directly impacted, people I care about are directly impacted. So I'm gonna stand not in front of you, not behind you, but shoulder to shoulder with you on these issues. And if you're going to jail, I'm going to jail with you, right? Like don't just show up for Orlando Pride events, which of course we all should go to, but show up for the city hall meeting where they're discussing protections for LGBTQ plus people. Come to Tallahassee with Equality Florida. Show up for trans lives. Like, don't just show up when it's easy, I think is how I would define it as. Show up even when it's hard.
Awesome. Thank you. So Ashley, as someone who is lives in the intersectionality of the LGBTQ community, Can you share a little bit about what does allyship mean for you in your work?
Yes, absolutely. So, a lot of what we do in our movement, we rely a lot on the allies as well to help us, in the process. It's a lot of education that takes place, a lot of empowerment. And I have to say that, and to me, an ally is someone who is going to walk alongside us and is going to stand there when we need them. And when we do reach out to those individuals, and like Anna mentioned, whenever, even when it's really controversial, they're still going to be there for us. So that's what an ally needs to be.
Thank you. And Josh, we know that the Orlando One Alliance has several alliance members throughout Central Florida, and some of those are LGBTQ and some aren't. So clearly there is some alliance or some allyship there. Could you go into that a little bit further?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And the One Orlando Alliance is a coalition of over 40 organizations that are either LGBTQ plus led or are ally organizations that help to advocate for the things that we have identified. And there's a link on the screen. The Alliance agenda is us outlining 10 areas that we know of the LGBTQ community faces significant barriers. And that ranges from hate crimes to homelessness to the process of coming out as your full self to working against racism, having anti-racist action, and forming anti-racist organizations. So I appreciate the use a moment ago of the word intersections, because intersectionality is a key component to how we approach the work that we do in the community and the work that we are living out in our day-to-day lives. So as a gay man, I have a certain amount of discrimination that I face, and people disempowering me or dehumanizing me. On the other hand, as a white cisgender man who has access to a variety of areas of privilege, I know that it's my job to leverage that privilege, to use the access that I have, the resources that I have, on behalf of people who don't have that same access. So a person of color, a woman, or someone on the gender spectrum that identifies as basically anything other than cisgender male is going to face gender discrimination. For people who are in a different socioeconomic space, for people who are in a disability situation in their life. So I have to, as an ally in those situations, educate myself about the issues, not expect the person who is living in an intersection where I don't live, not expect them to be my diversity Sherpa, so like I don't expect you to be Google for me. Educate myself, know what the issues are, know what the history is, and then figure out how can I show up in a way that is not centering myself and is rather coming alongside in order to make the difference, even like's been mentioned, when it's difficult to do that.
Thank you, Josh. And I thought you really brought up some really great points about the challenges of being an ally. And Anna and Ashley did also. And for the larger panel, well, how important is it, kind of following the line of what Josh said, of making sure that education comes from, yourself versus having, the labor fall on top of the marginalized community that you're trying to ally for? Anybody would like to jump in?
So I'll jump in first. Part of my role at the VA is educating other staff about LGBT care and services at the VA and in the community, talk about policies and things like that. But before I can do that, I have to start with educating myself. So I try my very best to stay apprised of terminology, of policies, procedures, resources, and things like that. And so it's a constant, almost daily thing. And sometimes I don't have the most recent information. And so sometimes I have had to ask a friend or what have you, but I do my best to educate myself so that I can help educate others so that we could all have the best knowledge possible next to others and supporting them in them aligning with their authentic selves and being able to be supported in whatever journey they choose to have. So it's really important for me to try my best. I love not having a Sherpa along the way. I love that that terminology that Josh used. I although I have asked friends at times, I don't solely do that because I think it's important for me to educate myself as well as in turn as I educate others. So I can appreciate how important that is.
Annie, would you like to share a little bit about your journey?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to. I mean, my first open LGBTQ friend was when I was in middle school. And actually, we had a crush on the same boy. And so it was really, really cute. And he's one of my good friends to this day. And he's actually a drama teacher as well in Orange County. And, I think for me, I know what it's like to be treated differently because I am a person of color and my family is Iranian. And I remember after 9/11 experiencing my first moments of racism, of folks making a lot of comments about me and my family and drawing connections between terrorism and my immigrant family. And so I think I've always just kind of held an understanding of how that makes people feel. When you judge, when you shame, when you draw these type of really irresponsible and dangerous connections. And so when I met my first friend and, we bonded over a crush, essentially, there really wasn't any question about it for me. It was like, yeah, like we're friends, he's gay, like who cares? And I do think a lot of Generation Z right now kind of get it as well. Like there's just not even a question about it, especially for trans youth. Like there's definitely seems to be more solidarity among cis folks, cis young people to also embrace their trans friends. So with that said, that was kind of like my first experiences, with demonstrating being an ally, demonstrating support. And growing up, like I got involved with GSA at my high school. I remember when I was a senior going to GSA meetings. I was also a theater kid and I did technical theater. So I was props and costumes. And theater is a space where a lot of LGBTQ youth can be themselves. And so, like, I think theater was also very key to me and just being around very beautiful and talented LGBTQ plus people and building really strong relationships in that environment. And then, again, when I got to UCF, getting involved in campus organizing really just led to a natural opportunity to work alongside organizations that focus on equity and equality. And the last thing I'll say to this point, though, is that I think that we have to constantly challenge ourselves to be better allies, right? And so ask people how you can be helpful. Never make assumptions about what it means to be an ally. For example, thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, like I try to be really intentional in asking folks that are Black, like how can I use whatever privilege I have to amplify your voice? And when this past summer there was an uprising against racial injustice, we literally passed the mic to folks who identify as Black Americans. Like I basically used our Instagram platform to say, what do you want to post? Like we have an audience. Tell me what you want us to say. And, really trying to use our avenues to show up by literally passing the mic. So I think that's also a part of being an ally is also giving up, I guess, sharing your power with others. Maybe the best way that I can say it.
Awesome. Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, can you ask me the question again, please? I was so caught up in what Anna was saying.
I know there's so many good bits that she's done.
I want to know who won with the boy in middle school. Did who got the boy? I know that's not an appropriate question.
Neither one of us did, and it was totally fine.
Okay, that was, you're good. Go ahead.
Equally as important. So, Ashley, the question I asked was, Josh had mentioned the fact that being an ally is to making sure that that work of, self-education falls on the person wanting to be an ally and not falling on the labor of the marginalized community. And so, just wanting to know, like, how you felt about that and, what examples you've seen of that.
Yeah, as a transgender individual, and a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I have to say that I know firsthand that we understand that it's a process. A lot of people want to learn, and we can pretty much have good judgment of when someone is wanting to genuinely learn, and it's an experience about the matter at hand. But we appreciate, I really value when somebody actually generally does ask a question and is intentional, saying, like, I want to learn more about what being transgender is, and help me understand more. How can I help you? Like, we've heard here from other panelists, and that's really something that I value and appreciate, because I think that through that we can continue to educate and empower, because again, like, a lot of times it takes those allies that are gonna be our advocate whenever we're not present. A lot of times we get to hear, like, things, that are said and stuff like that when we're around, but when we're not around. That's also, I think, something that truly defines an ally, someone who's going to stand for you even when you're not present.
Thank you. And I feel like that really ties into one of the points that Anna had made about being an ally when it's difficult, when it's not easy, when it's just outside of pride. And so wanting to open up the question to the panel is, how in the past have you used your privilege to help elevate those voices that needed to be highlighted?
I want to say that although now across the country, all our VAs have LGBT coordinators, I was one of the first ones in the country 10 years ago. So we have a diversity committee at the VA, African American, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, disabilities, women, but we didn't have an LGBT one 10 years ago. And that was a group of individuals that I had befriended, family members. I'd done that work, and I thought, why don't we have an LGBT special emphasis program? So I built the plane while flying it the last 10 years. Now there's one of me at every VA, not as good as me, obviously, but there's one at every VA across the country now. And I'd like to say that part of being a good ally, echoing kind of what the other panelists have said, is doing something that may be out of the norm or maybe uncomfortable or people aren't sure about, and how are we supposed to do it, but doing it anyway, even if other people disagree or they're not sure. I have, as they say, no dog in the fight. Although I'm cisgender and I'm not gay, that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be one of those people that, like you had stated, Ashley, like, that says, you know what, you may not like this or you may not agree with this, but you still need to treat this veteran or this individual with respect and care for them and their needs. And so jumping in when there was really no water in the pool 10 years ago was a big risk, but an important risk. And I think sometimes we need to take those risks in order to push the dial up and forward. And that, to me, is being a good ally too, is, kind of nudging people a little bit and saying, hey, like, we're not doing everything that we can. What more can we do? Whether others like it or not. And sometimes that's an uncomfortable conversation and it's difficult for people. But I'm a stubborn Irish woman, so I don't back down from a good fight and doing what is right, in my opinion, which means finding a way to use, as we've talked about, I'm a white woman. How can I use my privilege without overstepping, but standing next to, like you said, not bounding over, but next to somebody saying, what do you need from me and what can I do to assist you in pushing the dial up and forward. And I like being a motivator. I like being somebody who pushes the bounds, because that's important in these kind of areas, is pushing that envelope. And that, I think, makes a good ally too, is making sure that we're thinking outside of the box and how we can help each other in moving forward.
Totally. Thank you. Josh, I see you nodding.
So I love what you're saying, Carrie, and I also love your metaphors. Jumping into the pool with no water, that was nice. I like that. It sounds appropriately painful for that process. But I think for me, the recognition, like I grew up in a small southern town, predominantly white, and that was just the world that I lived in, and I came from. My grandfather was a state senator, so there was some privilege in my family of being more public and that kind of thing, and so I just am so familiar with the blinders of not knowing what I don't know, not knowing what other people's experiences are until I'm forced to listen or forced to hear that. And so my first experience of learning how to be an ally to anybody, other than just being nice to everybody, because I'm supposed to be nice to everybody, right? But I had a friend growing up who was Muslim, and she was one of my closest friends. And there were like, I don't know, 2 Muslim families in my hometown, and I always wondered, like, why on earth would you move here? Why would you do that to yourself? But and let me be clear, my town has a lot of positive things too, and it's a small southern town. And seeing what she experienced in a predominantly Christian environment and predominantly white, that was an eye-opener for me. It was like, wow, okay, so the world that I live in is not the same as what everybody else experiences. And so that since my friendship with her, starting to speak out against Islamophobia, and as was mentioned by Anna about the post 9/11 really fervor of bigotry towards Islamic people, Muslim people, doing interfaith dialogue events, things like that. It doesn't sound like that much. And it's also, the stigma is there. Like when people don't know someone from a particular marginalized space, all they have is stereotypes and caricatures and predominantly negative narratives, right? Of being less important, being less civilized, or being less capable, or just less than, right? And so when someone from the majority culture says those narratives are wrong, what's happening is the other people in majority culture don't know what to do with you at that point. They're like, but no, you're on our side. You're on our team, right? So it's being willing for people
the system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my early experience, and then that taught me how to move into that in other areas too.
Awesome, thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, no, I honestly, like everyone has, pointed out, they have very valid points in regards to this. And I have to say, I want to take this moment to recognize Carrie as well and Anna for all the work they're doing as allies for our community, working closely firsthand with the transgender community for over the past few years. I have heard so many stories of individuals that, found comfort and peace, and honestly, to be transparent, like perhaps even saved their lives in some cases because of your, advocacy as an ally to them. So thank you both for that, and Josh and Tatiana and all that for having these platforms as well and doing what you all do.
Thank you.
Don't make me cry happy tears.
I know.
I think it's so important to recognize these things whenever we have these platforms, so that's why I wanted to make sure that I mentioned this in this moment. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ashley. That truly means a lot. It means a lot. I mean, I am like, I know it's the same for Carrie. It's like, it just comes from like deep inside. Like there's no way I'm going to stop. Like, it's just like, I can't, and, in today in the Orlando Sentinel, there's a headline of me calling my opponent's attacks transphobic. And I'm happy that's a headline because it is transphobic and everyone needs to know that. Right. And so like, just say it and don't let people paint it as extreme, because it's not extreme to care about people and their ability to live a happy and healthy life. There's nothing extreme about that. And so I'm so grateful. No, honored to do it.
Well, people are scared when you start, ruffling feathers and rocking the boat and challenging the things that we've all been, conditioned to believe are correct. Like Josh was saying, with like the majority culture and really, going against that grain, people will turn around and say, wait, you're this. How can you be agreeing with that? And not really understanding what allyship really looks like in that way. And that's where I think, going back to what you said, Anna, like being an ally when it's not pretty, it's not just the pretty side, and going outside of that. Carrie, I wanted to go back to a point, you had shared a little bit about the history of your position, and being transparent. Until I met you, I didn't realize that, the VA actually even had anything that acknowledged the LGBTQ community, to be fully honest with you. I carried my own stereotype about the military, and it really kind of didn't have a very friendly, inclusive, welcoming space in my mind. And you talked about, the challenge of creating that position. I would love to hear, a little bit more about that and the work that you're doing within the VA.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I know that there's a lot of truths, and some misconceptions about the military. I mean, we had Don't Ask, Don't Tell till 2011. So I mean, there was a lot of that, and even now today, there's challenges in the military for people being able to serve as their authentic selves, which burns me up. But that's neither here nor there. So I'd like to say, at least at the VA, having services available to our LGBT plus veterans has been super important to me. Although I work in the mental health clinic, what people don't know is that the LGBT work that I've done over the last 10 years is a collateral duty I choose to do. It's not my paid position. It's something that I do because it's important to me. It's important to the people I love and care about. So I do it because I know what it means to our veterans and our community. So that's why I keep doing it. And I've been able to fold it into being a mental health therapist because I deal with many layers. I deal with the veteran population, the LGBT population, the mental health population, and those sometimes intertwine with each other. So I've been able to do LGBT groups. I have a transgender group twice a month. I have an LGBT group twice a month. I do couples, individual, and family therapy. We have various services for our transgender veterans. Pretty much everything pre and post-op is covered. The only thing that's not covered are the surgeries themselves, but they can get hormones through the VA, speech therapy, prosthetics, mental health, pre-surgical clearances, any post-op work that maybe needs to be done or something that needs to be fixed, that's covered as well. So a lot of people don't know, and that's part of my outreach role and why I do as much outreach as I can, so I can go out and tell our veterans, like, hey, I know the VA that you were used to, but this is new VA. Tell you what's available to you, so that maybe you're comfortable coming to the VA and getting some of your service here. Not that we have great resources in the community, but these veterans, they paid with their service. So now they can come and get their services at the VA because they served their time in the armed forces. And I want them to know that they're there. Do we have challenges still at the VA? Absolutely. But I can say here in Orlando, we are very blessed with a great director who is super supportive of the work that I do and meets with me and make sure that our staff is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if they need further education, that I'm the one that comes in and gives the education. So it's been wonderful to be able, we've had 10 years of Pride events at the VA. And I know some of you have come when we've had our celebrations in the past, which I've appreciated. And, you know, being able to do that, not everybody knows that we do that there at the VA every year. And so my job is to try and get the word out and educate our staff. We went from one site at the Orlando VA. We have 9 sites now all over Central Florida. So I go to each of our sites so people can see me, so I can educate our staff and educate patients about what we have available to them, so they know that this is a place that's safe for them to talk about who they are, and we can provide them the health care that they deserve, that they paid for with their service. So everybody says thank you to me, and I appreciate the thanks because it makes me feel good, because I want to help others, but it's truly my honor to be able to do what I do. And I'm blessed that I've been there 15 years to do it. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you, Carrie. And again, kind of help, educating myself and fighting those stereotypes that I have. Do you feel, how comfortable do you see LGBTQ plus veterans like in the VA, and do you see still some challenges amongst their own peers, for instance?
Absolutely. I'd be lying if I said, no, it's perfectly all a bowl of cherries. It's not. We do have some older veterans that are set in their ways, that may have their thoughts and beliefs about the LGBT plus community. And so I do my best to try and educate them. Same with some of our staff that we say are kind of old school and have some old school thoughts maybe. And so I try and educate them as well. So there are challenges that come along with that. But for the most part, I would say that they're pretty supportive of each other. I haven't run into a whole lot of that. And where I do, I try and educate. And if a veteran, or a staff member has issue, then we find a way to resolve it. But the bottom line is thankfully from the top down, our administration at the Orlando VA is supportive of making sure that our veterans feel like they have a safe space and that our staff are educated. And if they have a problem, then it's going to be a problem at the VA with their job, because we are to treat all of our veterans with dignity and respect and make sure that we provide them the best health care possible. So I'm glad that I have points of contact in all of our departments, to include our patient advocates, our veteran experience officer, our director, our chief medical officer. So we have people that are willing. I run a transgender treatment team every month with an interdisciplinary team, and we all try to provide the best care possible to our transgender veterans so that they know that it is a safe place for them. And I will continue to do that. And I will eventually make this a full-time paid position at our VA. I'm going to keep pushing that envelope I talked about. So I'm getting us there. So I'll keep going though.
Nice. And then you mentioned, we've talked about people, using their privilege to be able to kind of push that agenda. And we've talked about how uncomfortable it has been, pushing back on that system and those scripts. And then you also talked about, the education that you do. Can you give us an example of a time that you've had to, have that uncomfortable conversation and what that might have looked like as an ally?
Yes, so we do have some primary care doctors that we'll say are a little more advanced in age and have certain thoughts about LGBT individuals. I had one only a couple months ago at one of our clinics, and she did not feel it was appropriate to put in a transgender consult to me so that I could assist the veteran in furthering their transition journey and getting into hormone replacement therapy with our endocrinology department. So I had to speak to the doctor and try to educate her about our national policies. We have a national transgender and intersex policy and a national VA LGB policy, and they are to be followed by all staff. And I had to forward her the policies, and we had a discussion about it. She ended up hanging the phone up on me while I was in the midst of trying to educate her about our policies and what needed to be done to serve the veteran and all the services that they were allowed to have and available to them at our VA facility. And so I had to go back and talk to her supervisor, and we did a little education virtually like that. And I think that a lot of it, I tell people often that initial reaction of I can't do this or this is not appropriate. I think a lot of that comes from fear. It's the stuff under the water. You know, the tip of the iceberg is the anger and the resentment and the aggravation having to do X, Y, and Z. But I always say to my patients, and in this case, the staff person, what's going on underneath? What are you fearful of? How does this impact you? What does it cause? What does it ruffle your feathers about? And let's talk about that and get at the root of what you don't understand. And those fears, and how we can move past that so the veteran can get the services that they so want and need and deserve. And she was able to kind of bring it down and kind of work on the mindfulness of what she needed to do in order to assist the veteran. And it's just kind of getting to what's underneath, I think often helps us move forward. And if that doesn't help us move forward in assisting the veteran, then we keep going up the chain of command, which what the military has us do. And so the VA does the same thing. We go up the chain of command and making sure that down the line that the veteran does get the services that they need. So that happens every so often. But getting to the root, I find, really helps us kind of usually dissolve the issue. And we always make sure that the veteran gets what they need. Sometimes it may take a little longer as we provide that education and coordinate those services. But I will say I'm not a woman that backs down very easily. And most people that know me, being there as long as I have learned to go, okay, well, I guess this woman knows what she's talking about, so maybe we need to listen.
Nice.
I just want to add something too, if that's okay, Tatiana, because I had the chance to connect with Carrie in the past, and what drew me to the connection was that I visited the VA at Lake Nona to see the women's clinic, and I also visited the VA in my district in Baldwin Park, and I was just so thrilled by seeing rainbows and seeing trans ribbons, and there was like legitimately, to your point, Tatiana, of like assumptions, right? I'm like in the women's clinic, and they're showing PSAs, and one of them was like dog tags that were rainbow. And I was like, what is going on? And so, I mean, just to echo like the transformation we've seen at our VAs and the support spaces that have been led by Carrie and others, it really is transformational. And I hope it does reflect into the military as a whole, but we do know that within our military systems, we also have issues with just sexual assault still, right? There are so many problems within the military that we need to address to make sure that everyone who serves our country is safe at home and abroad. But the VA is really setting a standard that honestly other hospital systems should reflect. I mean, it's very, very impressive. There are so many private providers in Central Florida that don't have the same competency as what Carrie is doing. And it's just a reminder of how every industry and every sector can really be better about ensuring that folks feel safe, especially if you identify as trans, gender nonconforming. It can be hard to ask for help. It can be hard to even go to a doctor because you might be fearful of judgment and shame. So really important that the VA leads in this way, and it's hopefully going to be a model for everyone else to replicate.
And I'd like to just add what I heard in Carrie's story was a willingness to take it up the chain as an ally, and that is something that I was just talking to. I've heard this plenty of times. Like, if you're in a meeting with a marginalized person, the marginalized person speaks up and they get disregarded, and then the meeting moves on, right? But afterwards, because I'm an ally, I go up to the marginalized person in the hallway and be like, I was really there with you, and their thought is, well, why'd you keep your mouth shut? So it's showing up verbally and vocally. And also, I think what I've seen with a lot of white folks that I know, allies, like with the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a willingness to participate up to the point that you're starting to question systems and saying, hey, we've got to actually make systemic reforms in law enforcement. We've got to make systemic reforms in our criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I just want to love you and, support you. And if you ever want to vent, you can come to me. But once you start talking about this, I'm out. Like, marginalization is systemic. And if you're not willing to confront the system as an ally, then you're just trying to make yourself feel better, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Ashna. I think those are tremendous points. Sorry, actually, I think I cut you off.
No, I was saying absolutely agree with that. Yes.
And that's it is hard to ruffle those feathers and really challenge that that system that we've all grown up in and live, right? Like all of us live in the educational system, in the healthcare system, in the social justice or the criminal justice system. Like, that is the everyday, and realizing that the oppression that people are facing, and being the ones to stand up with that, can be kind of scary. And, my next question is to Anna, because you're a very vocal ally to the LGBTQ plus community. It's we see you everywhere. And going into your political career, did you ever have a moment where you thought, maybe it's not worth the risk, I might lose some votes, what will my reputation look like, especially if you've been in it for a couple years?
Right. It's interesting. I've had some folks. So we have a pride flag outside of our legislative office all the time, not just for Pride Month, but all the time. And we have an American flag as well. But folks have questioned sometimes our pride flag because they've said, well, you don't just represent the LGBTQ plus community. They're using different language than that. But, pretty much making like derogatory comments to us having a pride flag outside of our legislative office. And what I have to remind folks all the time is that just because you care about a group of people doesn't mean you don't care about other groups of people. But history tells us that there are groups of people that are treated differently based on who they love, the color of their skin, their gender identity, how much money they make, their disability status, their documentation status. Like, this is real life. We're not just making things up, right? And demonstrating solidarity, whether it's I put a pride flag outside my office or I say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't belittle anyone else's existence. If anything, it demonstrates that we value life so much that we want everyone to have the same value. And that's why we do this work. And so when those questions come up to me, I'm very intentional in being kind to whoever's asking it, because chances are no one's ever had a conversation with them about this. And I'm sure becoming defensive is going to lead to nothing constructive, right? And so it's been moments of me just kind of helping to educate folks. And actually, I've had my colleagues in the Florida legislature ask me, what does the B stand for? Referring to our acronyms. And so it's so interesting. And I'm glad they trust me to ask me, because they hear these terms and they don't want to be offensive, but they don't know where to go. And so they'll ask me for clarity. And I think with the privilege that I have, it's not, I'd rather I spend the time on that than one of my actual directly impacted people, because it's not your responsibility to teach, hetero cis folks, because they can also just Google it. But, I'm also really happy to be in a space where I can do that as an accomplice. And so long answer to your really good question, I have never regretted it. If anything, I've become emboldened by it. Now, there have been heated moments in the process, uncomfortable moments in the process. And my first memory goes to this most recent legislative session where we were fighting for ending discrimination within publicly funded private schools. And just for context sake, we all know that, Florida has a very large privatized educational structure where individuals, parents can take a voucher, literally take their child out of a public school setting and go to a private school with the voucher. So that's public money. And there's a a lack of accountability, and we could talk about that for hours, but under the context of LGBTQ plus issues, some of these private schools have evidence that they are discriminating against students, parents, and teachers for their sexual orientation and or gender identity. Gender identity in particular. You read some of these policies, they're horrifying of how they completely degrade trans youth. And it's one thing if you're doing it as a private institution, but it's something else when you're getting public money. So we filed a bill to prohibit that type of discrimination for any publicly funded private school. And let me tell y'all, I mean, it was a fight. It was a fight of the session. Myself and Rep. Smith, we became targets, of organizations that are very pro-voucher. There were faith-based groups that attacked us, and to really help folks realize, like, this isn't an effort to end the funding of private schools. We're just saying that if you are going to accept public money, you can't kick a kid out for being gay, and just that basic. And the reality too is that we have faith-based institutions who do an amazing job in creating intentionally open spaces. I mean, Bishop Moore Catholic High School, they have policies that are LGBTQ plus inclusive. And so, again, to really help demonstrate to folks, like, this isn't a us versus you scenario. Like, we can all do this together. And there's a path to do that. And actually recently Equality Florida announced that they're doing training, basically it's a voluntary training, but to private schools who do want to create safe schools. Equality Florida has made that available. And so that's, I hope, a step in the right direction for these institutions to realize you don't have to, this isn't a black and white situation, right? Like, you can come into the gray with us and let's figure this out. And there were moments during that fight where I was definitely drained and exhausted. They did a robocall in my district saying really negative, nasty things about me too. But again, like, we stand strong together. Like, this is a civil rights issue, like, of our era. And so we can't allow the opposition to push us back into the status quo. Right. And so really proud to do it, but it definitely, there's a constant educational component here, and you have to be willing to do that to be effective. And I am, but there is just that constant moment of saying, let's pause. And what do you mean by that? And really dive deeper into the conversation with people. And I think in most cases in politics, folks don't take the time to do that, but we really do make an effort. And that helps change a lot of perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, again, as everyone has said, thank you so much for your work. And I think you bring up a really good point, the fact that the work can be very draining. And so, as allies, how do you take care of yourself? What does self-care look like? Josh, I'll pick on you first.
I have wonderful theories about self-care. So I think that there's a couple different components to self-care as an ally, right? So, for example, for me as a white male, seeking to be an ally to Black Lives Matter and similar movements towards racial justice, right? There can be an element of, okay, my friend doesn't get a break from being Black, so I can't take a break in my allyship. For me, I have to remind myself, that's not how it works. I will be a better ally if I do take breaks, because if I'm exhausted, if I have just drained my reservoir completely when they're experiencing a traumatic moment of discrimination, or other forms of injustice or real or emotional or mental violence, those types of things, I will be better able to show up and be a compassionate friend, or stand up and speak when they tag team, right? When they say, I cannot deal with this person who's going after me on social media, or I cannot respond to this storm of whatever. But if I'm worn out, like, I can't show up in the best possible ways for other people. So for me, self-care looks like connecting with spiritual practices for myself. Like I'm a Christian, but I don't expect other people to be a Christian. So just let's get that out there. But for me, meditation, prayer, I love yoga. Anytime I can be outdoors, things that kind of fill me up, it makes a huge difference in my perspective on issues and helps me see, okay, this is just a day and this might be a hard day, but it'll be over in, X number of hours. So when I'm taking the time to use my tools, it makes me more able to show up for other people.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yes. So for me, family is big for me. And I have to say, like surrounding myself with family when I feel like it's time for me to catch a break. It's this fight is so continuous, right? And so it's really draining, like we've heard, but I for sure, and it's completely disconnecting at times, knowing that, it's time to just put phone down, get away from social media, and take a little bit of a break. As hard as that can be for me, right? Because I'm always like, is everything okay? Is there something that, we need to work on? But yes, that's what I find helps me catch a break as an ally, in general. And also having, like trust and, like other existing and emerging leaders when it comes to this movement as well, that, communicating with them and empowering one another, to know, because oftentimes when we're in these positions, we tend to be dehumanized, right? In so many ways. And so it's important to build that support system with other leaders as well and have each other's backs and know when, keep an eye on each other as well, know when it's time for, the other to catch a break and support them in that process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, as a mental health therapist, I really try to not be a hypocrite and practice what I preach to my patients, which is healthy self-care and whole health and mindfulness. I can tell you that the last 7 months have really tested me in self-care and mindfulness, in being in the present moment and what do I need to do today to take care of myself, which is in turn taking care of my family, my friends, and my patients. So I try to each day have little moments of self-care. Sometimes it's listening to a song, whether that's Queen today or the Bee Gees tomorrow or whoever, I need some of that to nourish my soul. Maybe it's arts and crafts. Maybe it's taking a hike with my sons or my husband and relying on my friends, that get where I'm coming from, my good handful of quality friends that we can talk to each other. And like Josh was saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. Your cup has to be full in order to fill others. And I have to remember that every day. I have not barely taken a day off of work in the last 7 months. So I'm going to take 2 weeks at Christmas. I've never done that before, but the Catholic guilt in me, because I was a Catholic school survivor, the Catholic guilt in me said, oh, you can't take more time off because that's less patients you'll see. But if I don't do that, then I'm going to get sick. I will not be healthy enough to be there for them. I had a heart attack at the age of 35. That's real talk right there. And my health, if I don't take care of myself, which I wasn't at that time, then I know that can take my life in all seriousness. And so I really make sure that I mentally and emotionally take care of myself, because it does impact my physical health, my spiritual health, my financial health. These 4 areas I have to make sure that I'm taking care of each day, little bits at a time, to not overwhelm myself. And I do try to share that and impart that on others as well, because it is very important. You have to put on your mask before you pass out so you can help the person next to you put on their mask. So really important.
Thank you.
Just to echo what folks have already shared, I think that self-care needs to be a priority, but I love Josh's comment of, I have a lot of great theories of self-care and not the best implementer. Something that I've been doing during this pandemic is I don't eat dinner in front of my computer. I eat dinner, with my family or with some sort of like fun TV. And so I actually did watch Schitt's Creek over the pandemic, and I'm watching The Good Place right now. And so some really great high quality LGBTQ plus inclusive television has been like food for my soul during this time. But just like Carrie said, I'm thinking about taking time off for the holidays because we really have been nonstop. Even before the pandemic, we were in legislative session for Tallahassee. So we just got back from Tallahassee and then the pandemic hit. So I've been go for at least a year now, if not even a little bit longer. So I'm hopeful that there will be no recount in Florida, knock on wood, that things are clear cut and I can take a little bit of rest because we got plenty of fights ahead of us.
Awesome. Well, with a couple minutes left, I wanted to, kind of do one last question. How would you all advise someone who wants to become an ally? So, like, where can they start? What can they do?
I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to learn and open your mind and your heart because you never know what the person, is going through. And the fact that you take time to, like integrate yourself into their life and get to know a little bit more about them might go a long way. So that's one of the advice that I would have.
Thank you, Ashley.
And I nominate Anna to go next.
Thank you, Ashley. I was going to say, depending on the issue, I mean, obviously this has come out with Pride, so we're focused on LGBTQ plus issues, but we're also intersectional, like Carrie and Josh said. So I think it really depends on the issue you want to be a better ally for, and then consider the organizations that are already engaged that you can get plugged into. Because like Ashley said, you might be scared to make that first contact. If you don't have any LGBTQ plus friends, or at least not that you know of, identify organizations where you can volunteer or where you can attend webinars, just really try to learn. I think learning is such an important part of being an ally. And don't be afraid to ask questions because at the end of the day, folks want you, they want you to be an ally, right? It serves everyone when we support one another. And so I identify groups that reflect the issue you want to get better at, and then build relationships within those spaces and ask open-ended questions. It's okay to wonder. And I think the biggest thing too is just suspend judgment and be inquisitive, because you have to set some sort of baseline of information to then be the best accomplice that you want to be.
Thank you.
I would just say, just show up. I know that we can't always be there in person nowadays, but it's showing up to stuff like this, or just showing up to be there as a friend, showing up to get educated. That's show up. Well, no matter what it is, show up and learn and, listen and open, like Ashley said, open your heart and your mind. We're not that different from each other. I know that there's divides that are happening in this country, and then the media and the news want to divide us more, but we're more alike than we are different. And so if we could just align with the similarities that we all have, that interconnectedness that we all have, if we focused on that versus the differences, I think it makes it a lot easier to be a good ally.
Great. Thank you. Josh?
And I would echo everything that was wonderful advice. And I would say there's kind of a self-reflection piece to allyship. So that initial urge to get involved, I would say, don't fly from that urge straight into the fire. Like, sit with that for a little bit and figure out what is it inside me that is driving me to want to be involved in this, because there are motives that will lead to unhealthy allyship. Like, oh, that person's on TV, I want to be on TV. Yeah, that's not a good motive. Sorry, try again, right? But if it's okay, I see something that is wrong and I want to be part of making it right. If that is the place you're coming from, then that can sustain you when it gets hard, because it's going to get hard. So I'm doing this because it is right, not because it's easy, not because people are going to like me for it, but because it's right. And then the other steps that have been mentioned are definitely like a perfect way to engage in whatever the area might be.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for taking this time to chat with us and to have a seat at our table. And just thank you for all the work that you are doing. Clearly, it is making our community here in Central Florida so much better. And thank you for joining this conversation. And so once again, hope you have a wonderful evening and see you next time.
Thank you so much.